ladies, welcome back to my channel. So, I wanted to talk about lessons that I've learned from my wealthier colleagues and friends, and just people that I've encountered in life throughout the years. It is my intention, as if you're familiar with my channel, it's my intention to expose my listeners to different walks of life, different points of view, so that you can then apply these different viewpoints to your life, whatever is applicable, in order to increase your social standing and give you a better outcome in life. As I've said before, limiting yourself to just your community and what you know, regardless of race, but especially as a Black woman, a woman of color, if you only limit yourself to the very prevalent fixed mindset that exists in the Black community, you are going to have that same outcome. You are going to have a limited, fixed experience in life, because having a fixed mindset or a limited mindset is the opposite of growth. In that you have these beliefs that hold you back, essentially. And when you have beliefs that hold you back, it'll play out in your life, because your mind is basically the powerhouse that informs your decisions to propel you to make moves in life. And if you have a limited mindset with regards to maybe career growth, forming relationships, friendships, allies, whatever, then you're not going to see results. Memberships are now live on this channel. Click the link in the description box to sign up to receive access to exclusive content and perks. And so, one of the things that I noticed with more affluent groups that I've encountered is that they tend to have a more objective outlook on life. I had the opportunity to work for some time in Jamaica with a large company, one of the largest companies in the Caribbean, and she was my direct supervisor. And she belongs to one, if you're familiar with Jamaican history, she belongs to one of the big families in Jamaica. Another colleague that comes to mind when I think of having a more objective outlook on life is my colored colleague from South Africa. And I'm saying colored because that's literally the term that they use in South Africa for people who are mixed race, of mixed heritage. And then I'm also thinking of a friend of mine who is of Caribbean, of Jamaican descent as well. She's a monoracial Jamaican woman. All of these women and their families, the one thing that they have in common again is that they have objective outlooks on life while still remaining true to their values. So for example, whether that be family, my South African friend, like she was very, very big on family, friends, gatherings, like she was constantly putting something on. So she was traditional in that sense, but she was very much liberal, I guess, or open-minded in her life experiences. Like she wasn't afraid to learn new things. She wasn't afraid to talk to different people. She was very well educated and well versed on different cultures and beliefs. And so by extension, she was able to connect well with other people. The same with my Jamaican supervisor. Like her family is very religious, not very religious in the sense that like you can only listen to Christian music, but like they very much valued their Christian values. So going to church, especially like for her and her husband, going to church was important, but she didn't impose that on her children. So while she would say like, she would say things like, we are Christians and so don't have children outside of wedlock. Make sure that you carry yourself this way. She would also support her kids in their endeavors. Like, for example, I remember one time we were going out for a team dinner, and her daughter, she was like a teenager at the time. She wanted to go to the club. Anyone who's familiar with Caribbean culture, like, and it's common in the West as well, in North America as well, but it's even more so common for teenagers as like young as 14, 15, 16 to go to the club and like go to adult clubs. So instead of her like saying, no, like we're Christians, we don't do clubbing, we don't listen to secular music, which is, I guess, her right, especially for a teenager, she would bring her daughter to the club and wait outside for her. Like she would like maybe go home and do things or go hang out with friends and then go pick up her daughter when she was done clubbing. And for someone like me who was raised in a very like heavily Pentecostal culture, Jamaican culture, like the other side of that dichotomy, that was like very fascinating to me because it was like I would have never imagined, first of all, discussing going to the club with my parents, let alone having them drop me off as a teenager and then picking me up. But she did this because number one, she realized that her daughter was very, very beautiful, and she still is. But her daughter was like super into fashion. She knew how to put herself together. It's kind of problematic, like having her in spaces, not kind of problematic. It is problematic having her daughter in spaces where there's adults who can potentially be weird. But she also recognized that there were other young people her age who would be in those spaces who she could potentially form partnerships and romantic relationships with, and thereby increase her prospects. And a lot of times it was other affluent, well to do kids from those affluent families who also frequented those spaces. So even though, yes, her mom held on to her religious beliefs, she also understood the importance of exposure. And she also understood that your network is your net worth. And so she instilled that into her children from a young age. And rather than kind of barring her completely and saying, no, like, stay home and take up your book and only go to church, she said, okay, you're still young. I am going to set up parameters where I am a part of you networking at a young age and where you can be safe. But I'm also going to cultivate this skill in you from a young age so that you can benefit. And now, fast forward, she's like in her mid 20s. She ended up marrying a very prominent person in Jamaica because her mom exposed her or allowed her to be exposed to these social networks where you go and make connections. In America, it's kind of like going to like conferences, joining a country club or any other sort of like professional club or association and forming those connections there. In Jamaica, a lot of times, yes, those exist, but also going to parties where like the wealthiest cream of the crop go to is one of the main ways that you form social connections that can thereby extend like your family's social standing, net worth, and whatever. And the same thing applied with my South African friend. Like, she has a daughter who is a dark skinned young girl, like a brown skin black girl. So she's colored, but her partner, her child's father, is a dark skinned man. First of all, she understood the importance of having a social connection as well, having a social network and knowing people just in general as a human being, but even more so as a dark skinned black girl. Because again, like black girls in general tend to be sheltered. They tend to be, especially again from their religious upbringing, they tend to be sheltered. And it's like, I'm trying to protect you from the world. But then at the same time, these same parents would pray and ask God for connections and doors to open for their kids, but then they kind of prevent them from being able to know what those doors are and enter those spaces, let alone being able to even open those doors in the first place. Their only sort of social exposure is the church, which again kind of has a very fixed mindset leaning one way, or their family who very often share the same viewpoints. And if you live in a country like the United States, Canada, the UK, it is a handicap for you to, again, stick to one viewpoint because these countries are melting pots. These countries, and it's set up by design. The government set it up by design so that we can benefit from diversity of thought. My South African friend recognize the importance of this for her daughter. She saw how her husband's side of the family, very religious, very rigid viewpoints. She saw how that side of the family lived and said, I don't want to impose that on my daughter because she saw how that impacted Black girls long term. So a lot of times Black people will say that we're excluded from spaces. White people don't let us enter spaces and gain access to the same resources that they do. But a lot of times you're not excluded because of your skin tone. You're excluded because you literally cannot speak that language. You cannot relate to that experience. So the same thing kind of applies in social settings where you only understand your viewpoint. And if your viewpoint is a minority viewpoint, minority in the sense like not like your skin tone, but minority in the sense of your thought process, then obviously you stand to lose out because while the rest of the world kind of relates and is able to converse on what the status quo holds, you're over here kind of limited in your exposure and your opportunities because you haven't elevated to the next level where you're able to relate to what the general population relates to. My South African friend understood the importance of exposing her daughter to what the rest of the world was. So, in other words, she made sure that her daughter assimilated with the culture that she was raised in. If you stand out like a sore thumb, not because of how you look, which a lot of times Black people will default to, but because you simply cannot relate to what is going on around you, then you will fall behind. And the same thing was true with my friend from Jamaica. She is a monoracial Black woman. Both of her parents are dark skinned. Her parents kind of adopted this approach with her and her brother where they were like, we are going to raise you the way that white folks raise you. Any dream that you have, any passion or desire, we are going to entertain it and see where it goes. And so obviously, like growing up, they would kind of guide them on the do's and don'ts of life when it came to like finances, basic skills that more well-to-do people teach their kids from like childhood. So like how to budget, how to invest, how to save, how to have multiple streams of income. Those things were taught at a young age. So then she kind of grew up with being able to see business opportunities. And because she was able to apply what her parents taught her, essentially, her parents were confident in, like, okay, yes, she was able to grasp the skills that we taught her. And now we're seeing that she's applying it, and we can trust her with our money to invest in business ventures. So she had like a standard 9 to 5, but she wanted to invest in a laundromat. Anyone who understands owning a business, owning a laundromat, vending machine, those type of passive income streams, they are considered like the basic level form of owning a business because they're fairly affordable to start. They require little to no effort. Like they're considered, obviously you got to put in some work in like maintaining the machines, keeping the place clean, whatever, changing out the coins, making sure there's enough change for people to be able to wash their clothes. But it's not like you have to manage inventory, manage overhead costs, and manage whatever. You got to pay your rent, obviously, at the laundromat, but it's a very, 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 very low overhead cost, and it requires little to no supervision. You can literally set up an automatic lock, for example, at your laundromat after a certain time, like once you leave, the door is locked. When the laundromat's closed at like 10 p.m., for example, and have cameras and not be required in the space during the business hours of operation. You can literally work your 9 to 5 and still have a laundromat. So anyway, she had like a vision for starting up her laundromat as well as like other add-ons to that business. And her parents saw her vision, saw her effort, saw that even if she didn't excel in something in school or in a career, they would see her at least putting in an effort. And they honored that by saying, okay, we're going to give you the money to purchase this business. So not only did they instill like the skills that are necessary to succeed, but they also set up their life in a way financially where her and her brother didn't have to start from scratch. They didn't have to build from the bottom. They were able to build from the foundation that their parents already set, which many Black women, whether ambiguous or unambiguous, don't have that experience. Many Black women are having to build from the mud, as they say, having to build from the ground up because for whatever reason, their parents kind of failed to set that financial foundation for them. And her parents didn't come from wealth. Her parents were immigrants to North America from Jamaica. They kind of came from very basic, humble beginnings, but not only did they work hard, which a lot of Black women don't have a problem doing, they were smart with their money. They invested. They didn't just stop at saving. They invested their money. Their money compounded, which then allowed them to move to a very nice neighborhood, drive very nice cars, and then be able to have enough disposable income to give to their children to like put a down payment on their home and then like be able to purchase a business. And then from the purchasing of the business, like obviously they're able to build upon that wealth even more. So I say all of this to say, if you have children already, be like my friend's parents and make sure that you're making wise decisions that will set your kids up for success. So that includes living within your means, not buying name brand over having, a healthy, stable place to live in. Your kids will value having a safe place to live over having the latest Jordans in the future. Maybe in the time, in the moment, they would like to be able to, be on par with their friends. But in the long run, having a stable environment to be raised in, striving for excellence in your career so that it can benefit your kids will matter a lot more than them being able to own Jordans in the second grade. Whether you have kids or not, in order to be successful, you need to let go of the fixed mindset that exists in Black families, especially Caribbean and African households, because having a fixed mindset regarding life, it often comes across as being fearful, especially in the name of religion. Like you'll hear religious parents say, like, don't go there, don't mix with those people because they're all bad if they're not like us. And you could be really missing out on some amazing life connections and opportunities just because you chose to judge somebody by the way that they looked and not their character. Like, obviously, if that person kind of has behavior that is toxic and problematic, then yeah, steer clear. But just because someone is not religious and over the top doesn't mean that they're a bad person. A lot of times I've found people who are not as religious, even if they're not like agnostic or atheist, they still identify as some religion. When they have sort of a good limit on religion, if you will, they tend to be more open minded and more like easier to get along with because they're not as judgmental. And they also tend to be more successful. And that success ranges whether it's like middle class, upper middle class, wealthy, or they just have a more fulfilling life because they're just happy. They're not stuck with rigid rules. They don't live their life with rigid rules. They tend to achieve more in life. And I know that this fear also comes from being seen as like less Christian, but like that's honestly just an inability to compartmentalize and separate the two as both being equally important, yet different parts of their identity. So, for example, my supervisor from Jamaica, like I mentioned before, her and her husband would go to church often and they would try to like instill and reinforce their Christian values on their children, but they were able to compartmentalize and say, okay, yes, this is like this Christian identity that we have governs how we behave and interact with other human beings, but that's not the only part of who we are. We are also a part of a society where other people may not hold those same viewpoints. We're also business owners. We're also executives. We are also people who love reggae music. We're also people who love to go to parties. That doesn't mean that we're less Christian or that we're going to automatically indulge in like alcoholism and heavy drugs. It just means that we're able to hold multiple identities. Sometimes these identities will overlap and intersect, but a lot of times these identities are able to exist on their own without one meaning less than the other. But finding that balance in life while holding an open mindset, you will go far in life. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the topic. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.